In 1962, the Haworth estate sat like a crown jewel on the edge of Surrey, too grand to ignore, too quiet to fully trust. Margaret Haworth had been its lady for 11 years. She was the kind of woman other wives studied in silence, perfect posture, perfect diction, perfect smile, the sort of perfection that didn't invite friendship, only admiration and quiet suspicion. Her husband, Edward Haworth, was a man of routine. Breakfast at 8, papers by 9, whiskey at precisely 9 in the evening. A good man by all accounts. Predictable, and predictability, Margaret had learned, was the most dangerous kind of neglect. It started with the West Wing. The polite excuse of renovations, the servants avoided it. Edward never mentioned it. And Margaret had once asked, "Dust and disrepair, my dear," Edward had said, not looking up from his paper. That was the end of that, or so he thought. On a Tuesday afternoon, when the house was unusually still and the air carried that heavy, pre-rain silence, Margaret did something she had never done before. She took the key. It wasn't hidden while Edward had never believed she would look. The lock turned with a soft, reluctant click, as though the house itself disapproved. The West Wing did not smell of dust. It smelled, lived in. Faint traces of perfume lingered in the air. Not Margaret's, something lighter, younger. Her heels sank into a carpet to clean for abandonment. The curtains were drawn, but sunlight bled through just enough to reveal a room frozen in time. A vanity table, a glass half filled with water, a silk scarf draped carelessly over a chair, and then a photograph. Margaret picked it up slowly, her fingers steady in a way that surprised even her. A young woman smiled back at her. Soft curls, bright eyes, the kind of beauty that didn't yet understand its own power. On the back, in Edward's handwriting, "For my darling, always hidden, always mine." Margaret did not cry. She did not gasp. She simply understood. That evening, she dressed as she always did for dinner. Emerald silk, hair perfectly set, lips painted just enough to suggest effort, not desperation. Edward barely looked up when she entered. "You're radiant tonight," he said, the way one comments on the weather. Margaret smiled. "Am I?" Dinner was served. Soup, then lamb. The usual choreography of a marriage long past conversation. Halfway through the main course, Margaret placed her fork down gently. "I visited the West Wing today." Edward froze. Not dramatically, not guiltily, just enough. "You shouldn't have done that," he said quietly. Margaret tilted her head. "No? I thought it was my house." A pause. Then carefully, "It's complicated." Margaret almost laughed. Complicated. Such a small word for such a large betrayal. "Is she alive?" Margaret asked, her voice softer now. Edward's silence was answer enough. The rain began shortly after dinner, a soft, persistent tapping against the tall windows, as though the night itself wanted to be let in. Margaret stood by the glass, staring out into the darkness. "You've always been sensible, Margaret," Edward said behind her. "I trust you'll handle this with discretion." There it was. Not apology, not remorse, expectation. Margaret closed her eyes briefly, then turned. "Of course," she said. "Discretion is something I've always excelled at." And she smiled. 3 weeks later, the young woman in the West Wing was gone. No farewell, no scandal, no whispers in town. Just gone. Edward never asked questions, because he already knew better. By autumn, the Haworth estate had a new rhythm. Edward still had his routines, his whiskey, his papers, but Margaret had begun taking long drives into the city. She returned later than she used to. She wore new perfumes, laughed more easily, and sometimes, late at night, she would sit at her vanity with a small, knowing smile, as though replaying a private joke no one else was clever enough to understand. One evening, as Edward poured his whiskey, he noticed something unusual. A photograph on Margaret's dressing table. He picked it up. A man this time, handsome, younger, looking directly into the camera with the kind of confidence that suggested he feared very little. On the back, in Margaret's elegant script, "For my darling, always seen, never yours. Edward stared at it for a long time. Then, slowly, he placed it back exactly where he found it. In the Haworth estate, nothing more was ever said, but everything had changed. Because in a house built on silence, Margaret had finally learned how to speak.